Howdy folks, Rudros here, and it is time for set championships for Set 5 Shimmering Skies, and to tell you what decks you should and should not be taking to these set championships, I have someone who did very well at the Las Vegas Challenge this weekend. It is Mr. Justin Ward. He joined me last time, and we'll be talking about his list as well as he finished in the top 16 at Vegas. Mr. Justin Ward, how are you, sir?
I'm doing good. How are you doing, Travis?
Awesome. Oh, dude, I'm happy to have you on here. Obviously, you're a local, so, you and I get to chat all the time, but
right.
it feels just especially potent since, here's your top 16 winning list from this past weekend. So you must be riding a pretty good high right now.
Yeah, I definitely was. Felt really good to finally get that invite that I barely missed out on from Chicago. So, and then also coincidentally, the weekend of Continentals is also the weekend of my birthday, so it'll be a nice little trip.
Oh, nice. Dude, that's awesome. So I'm going to just show everybody that we're going to recommend 5 ink combinations for everyone. I'm going to show you what they are up front, and then before we delve deep into these, I'm going to have Justin, if there's any kind of off-color ones we have that aren't listed here, but you still think, maybe these could do well. So the 5 colors we'll be talking about are green-gray, purple-red, and this is blue-red. Then we have yellow and gray, and green and purple. So keeping those 5 in mind, Justin, are there any other ink combinations that you're like, maybe you could consider these as well as kind of more of an off chance?
Obviously, amber emerald, green yellow. I think it's a fine deck. Obviously, it's a deck that takes quite a bit of skill to pilot to the most effective that it can be. Then obviously you could play like blue steel, but I think that deck is like particularly weak right now. And it has to pretty much shift its entire game plan in order to not get blown out by red blue.
Yeah.
And then obviously you could play purple steel, just the repeat deck, whether that's aggro or more of a mid range. But I think from the past weekend with both challenges, I think there was only like maybe 1 or 2 between the top 64 for both. Yeah. So certainly playable. Is it something that I would take the set champs? Probably not if I was trying to win one of those. So
gotcha. Well, and let me ask you about, this was kind of one of the boogeyman decks when the set was kind of first announced. Everyone was very scared of this Daisy Duck. So this hyper aggro yellow-purple, we see it at least was able to make Top Cut. I think there was at least 3 versions of this in the Top Cut. I don't know how far it got, though. So clearly there's some times where this deck just opens what it wants. It's like, all right, well, you're done in 3-4 turns. So in spite of that, why would you not recommend this for a set championship?
So I would recommend this if you were in a field full of like red blue or even red purple, for instance, just because it can prey on the slow openings. However, if you're in a steel dominated meta, then you can struggle with this deck quite a bit, just because of the removal spells like Strength of Raging Fire, Let the Storm Rage On, Tinkerbell. So the deck can start out fast, but if it gets to the point where your opponent has stabilized, it can be really hard to claw yourself back out of those situations. You pretty much have to see Amethyst Chromacon in order to keep the gas, or pretty much the foot on the pedal, and just keep going. So
yeah, I've seen some of these lists where they don't draw that and then they just run out of cards, just like aggro of old. So
yeah, exactly. That's probably the best card in the hyper aggro deck. Like, a lot of people will say it's Daisy, but that card is the Amethyst Chromacon is just insane. Just being able to see 2 cards a turn or more, and just not caring what your opponent draws while you're just putting threats out on board and saying, answer this or I win next turn. So
turn after turn. Yeah, that's a good point. Were there any other ink colors you wanted to mention, or do you want to jump into the main 5?
I don't think there's really anything else. I mean, a lot of people might try playing that Ruby Steel deck, but I think it just had really good variance. It's been a very poor ink combinations since the game came out a little over a year ago. So
yeah, I'm quite surprised this one got as far as it did. Well, let's jump into our main 5, and we'll go right down the list. Just as a clarification, too, for everyone, we're not saying that these lists I'm showing, these are just lists that topped and did really well in Vegas. This does not mean you should be running these exact cards or this exact version of the list. We're just using it as a reference, so just putting that out there. Okay, so starting with what won the event, Green Steel. Wait a minute, didn't we get rid of this? I thought we quote-unquote banned Bucky, eroded Bucky. Why is this list still dominating people? Why does it feel like Discard is still as strong as ever? Why should you take this to a set championship?
Well, it's still alive because Prince John is a very good card. Being able to discard your opponent's resources while also still making sure you're keeping your own is very good. It can also do the fabled Shift Diablo, either use a removal spell or a discard spell, singing and as well as playing an Ursula on the same turn. So, and a lot of decks still can't deal with Diablo effectively. So unless you're playing Steel or a Ruby-based deck, it's very hard to get rid of that card.
Yeah.
I also think that Green Steel won the event because it was very well positioned for it. Obviously, you could see based off of the top cut representation and its conversion. I think there was 3 Green Steels in top 4 at Vegas.
Yeah, 1, 2, 4. Yeah, there's quite a bit. There's one down in 13.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I know I played one in top 64, although he was on more of like a mid-range version that didn't really focus on the discarding stuff, so it really wasn't too incredibly difficult. But this version, if it opens the nut draw just like it did last format, it can feel pretty unbeatable. Yeah, so
I felt that at locals. I've had to face this a couple times at locals, and when it's just they just see everything perfectly, Diablo turn 1, and I was kind of talking to Justin about this beforehand. If they shift Diablo turn 2, they don't have to pay ink for him, so you get 3 ink there. Then they have him sing something like Storm Rage on, kill your only character. That's another 3 ink, and then they still play an Ursula and rip something out of your hand. So they get 8 ink on turn 2 instead of 2. Like it's so insane.
Yeah, the nut draw is insane, and then if you're able to follow it up with like a Prince John or an Ursula the next turn and have another removal spell, it can get pretty far away from you pretty quickly. Yeah. Now another thing too that was really powerful with this is that the 2-drop slot last format was filled by Bucky, which was obviously a very good card for this deck. However, it pretty much just slotted in Morph for Bucky, which allows for shifting in Beast on turn 3.
Yeah.
Which doing a Beast on turn 3 means that you're pretty much avoiding every potential removal spell that it normally gets hit at if you were to cast it for 5.
Yes.
However, the only time that like shifting it in you could get punished by is if you're on the draw against red blue, and then they have ice block plus brawl. But outside of that, just a turn 3 beast drawing additional cards every turn, as well as having Diablo drawing you additional cards every turn. You're pretty much seeing like 20 or so cards extra every game. So it's almost, I want to say it's more consistent than red blue, but like once its engines get going, it feels at that level.
Yeah. And what's interesting is that the shifted version of Beast, you didn't see a whole lot in the past. Usually people would put this out on 5. And by 5, I usually had a card to deal with it. But when this comes in on 3, like even if you mim Fox into it, you'll stop the card draw, but the Beast still lives and you lose the Fox. So like there's just nothing, like you said, outside that ice block scenario that efficiently trades with this card when it comes down that early.
Yeah, exactly. Now, one thing about the Green Steel deck is that there are a lot of times where your opening 7 is awkward and you have to decide whether you want to mulligan for a Diablo opening or keep a Prince John line. Mm-hmm. Whenever you draw like a mixture of both, it's just like, okay, well, I don't have any discard spells, but I have Prince John, but I have all these discard spells and I have Diablo and no Prince John, so it's like, what exactly do I want to accomplish with the game? I do think this deck takes quite a bit of skill to pilot the most optimally. You can't just just for free, just throw out Floodborns every turn like it could last format and just not have to worry about things. Um, so, and then having access to Pete is just a complete dagger. It's a complete dagger for Amber Steel as well as Blue Steel as well, because you can even play this on turn 3 and against Blue Steel, and then they can't answer your Diablo, or they can't sing a whole new world, and then you end up discarding it from their hand, and then they just run out of gas.
Yeah, the amount of times it's like, well, I have Grab Your Sword in hand, so I could clean up your Johns, but Pete says I can't. Like, when they get ahead, Pete just essentially assures they stay ahead. It's so brutal.
Yeah, I'm not sure how much of the format Green Steel will take a hold of. If it does end up seeing a lot more representation, I could see this deck implementing a couple copies of Grab Your Sword in order to help mitigate the mirror match. But generally, even with a list like this, if you were to play the exact same 60 against someone, the better players should win outside of small variants.
So we've been singing its praises. It's very clear how strong this deck is, as it still is from last set. Is there any deck it fears? Is there any reason you shouldn't take it to a set championship?
It has a good matchup and a bad matchup in the blue-red, just like last format. Whenever your engines are competing tick for tack, blue-red can generally come out ahead just because of how powerful Hiram Flaversham is to shut off the discard mechanic. Just because you're getting 3 new cards every turn, including the card that you draw for turn. Obviously, whenever you have a Diablo on board, you're able to
benefit
just
from,
help.
that card draw.
Yeah, you're able to benefit from it. But if they're able to answer your Diablo early, it can kind of get a little out of hand. I know I played against Ed Chu in round 9, and he was on Green Steel and went pretty easily for me. Just because I had the answers and everything. Then the moment a big Sisu comes down and just wipes your whole board, it's just game over.
Yeah, Sisu is, and they can't pull that out with like an Ursula or a Bare Necessities if they're playing yellow, so.
Yeah.
Very good. Well, I think that's pretty good on Green Steel, Old Emerald Steel. So let's move on to our next deck. I have to admit, this is kind of my pet deck, and I struggled with it so much at the start of the format. I was surprised to see it get as high as it did at Vegas. And if you look at this, I mean, this is really similar to the deck that it was last set. I mean, I think the only new card here is Elsa, right? Like, Ruby Amethyst, we know it's been strong in the past. I thought it fell off a bit. At least in Vegas it didn't. Justin, why should you bring Ruby Amethyst to a set championship?
So if you want something that is consistent at what it's doing, then Ruby Amethyst is probably that deck. Is it the most powerful deck in the room? No. Is it the most consistent deck in the room? Probably. Just every turn you just have, or every game rather, you just have a solid game plan of going 1-drop, whether that's like Chernobog's Followers, Magic Broom, or if you're playing the 1/3s in Olaf and Mini, and then follow it up on 2 with either a Snake or a Flynn Rider, and then go Sisu Castle afterwards. Really good card that this deck got to help with the green matchups, though, is for sure the Elsa Fifth Spirit card from Shimmering Skies. Just being able to tap something and then go into Diablo is very powerful.
And survive, to not lose the body to it too. That's huge.
Yeah, it being able to survive is very good. A 2/5 is actually very difficult to get rid of a lot of the times. Obviously, in the red matchups, it's very easy for them to get rid of. But outside of having a crackback removal spell, it'll generally sit on the board and get at least another card before it leaves, which is good.
I noticed in this particular list, they kind of cut down on Maui, which may seem kind of crazy, but on other times I understand it, because there's sometimes I just top deck Maui at the wrong time, and I'm like, I need like something else, not this card right now. Is there a reason? So obviously it's pretty consistent. That's kind of always been one of Ruby Amethyst's big strengths. Again, the only real new card here is Elsa. So with only one new card, why would you not bring this to a set championship? What are the matchups you're scared of?
Well, the matchup I'm scared of the most with this deck is for sure the green purple deck. I feel like green purple and even green yellow, it's just completely not in your favor for those matchups. Just for the way that they play out. The green purple deck, it can keep up with your draw package. Since they also play all the purple cards, but then also the moment that a Clarabelle comes down when they're behind, and you have something like 4 or 5 cards in hand and they have none and they just refuel it, it can get carried away pretty easily. Which Clarabelle is an insane card, but if you know how to play around it effectively, you can mitigate its impact. But you always have to be mindful of it whenever you're playing against any kind of green deck that you think could have it.
What do you think about its red-blue matchup? Because I made a deck tech video on it earlier where you and I had some matches personally, and I just felt like sometimes it was even too slow for your red-blue. Like, if your red-blue got off to a good ramp, it's inefficient to answer dime. I can't answer items at all. It's hard to get rid of a Tamatoa. How do you feel about it into that matchup?
So I would say that red purple is slightly favored in the matchup. I wouldn't say it's as overwhelmingly favored as it was last format.
Interesting.
Mainly because of red blue getting not only Hideaway but also Cuzco.
Yeah.
But being able to have the curve of Flynn, Sisu Castle against red blue is pretty much your game plan. You're just trying to get that early lore and get to the point where you're at 12, 13 lore and just squeaking in with 1-2 lore turn and just using goat and then bounce in order to close out the game. However, there are a lot of red blue decks that are going to Scar in the deck as well as Vitalosphere again. Which means that your whole game plan of going Flynn's Sisu Castle can get completely ruined pretty quickly.
Yeah. That was some good advice about red purple. We're going to move on to a deck you should be very familiar with because, hey, you built it and you took it to the top 16. Congratulations again. So this is Ruby Sapphire. This is pretty much uncontested the ultimate late game deck of Lorcana currently, and without some major changes to the design, I don't really see that going away anytime soon. So this is your deck. Tell me all about it. Why should you bring the deck that you took to Vegas to a set championship?
If you want the deck that is the most powerful in the room, then red blue is that deck. So there is the variance of just running cold and not drawing your item package or ramp package early and just getting blown out. But if you know how to mulligan correctly with the deck, then you can completely mitigate that chance. The addition of Tipo in the deck was completely huge for this deck. You used to have to rely on the uninkable one jump ahead, in order to get that turn 2 ramp, which made you very vulnerable to stuff like Bare Necessities or Ursula Deceiver to rip it from your hand, especially going second. But with Tipo now, you always guarantee yourself that turn 2 ramp because it can't be discarded from your hand. So I know a lot of people, when it was revealed, were pretty skeptical about Tipo just because it pulled a card from your hand, whereas one jump took it from the top of your deck. But Tipo is just absolutely insane, in my opinion.
He's inkable too.
Yeah, the fact that it's inkable is also huge because after you do that turn 2 ramp, you don't ever need the other copies anymore. Whereas, like with the one jump aheads in the last format, once you did your ramp on turn 2, you're like, okay, I hope I don't see any other one jumps, or I hope I have Fishbone so I can ink it if I would draw another. This deck pretty much has a solid package of, I would say, anywhere between 40 and 45 cards. And then the last portion of the deck is pretty much just tech choices that you could want to play or altering ratios. I know I personally play King Candy for Vegas, but that was solely just to have what is a functional Grandma Tala or Hiram in the mirror match, just be able to put out a 2 lore threat on turn 5 if I had to, in order to draw 2, and then also ship something back to the bottom. I know a lot of people probably prefer Gaston over it, the 6-drop Gaston Intellectual Powerhouse, but I valued the fact that this costed 1 mana less. But every time I casted it and put in the play, it actually performed very well for me, so I enjoyed it.
I think what works really well with him too is that you draw 2 just straight out, and then from your entire hand you get to put 1 to the bottom. So it's not like you have to put one of the 2 you draw. And like you said, sometimes it's like, oh well, I have an extra 1 jump that I don't really want right now. Oh good, let me get this uninkable out of my hand. I was pleasantly surprised testing him how well he performed as well.
Yeah. Is it something that I'm going to play going forward? I'm not entirely too certain yet. Formats evolve, which means your deck has to evolve with it. I think having multiple hideaways in the deck is also really good, just because not only is it item and location removal, but it can act as conditional ramp on turn 2 if necessary. So it's like you're effectively playing 8 ramp spells, even though you really only have 6 in the deck for turn 2.
Yeah, you can't, not ideal, but I've seen you do it before where if you have to, sometimes if you play Ice Block or Popsicle turn 1 and you see no other ramp, you'll just hide away your own item to ramp yourself up on turn 2.
Yeah, and then the Sisu Ice Block package in this deck can just be completely backbreaking for a lot of decks, like Amber Steel, for instance. You can also blow out Green Steel with this too, and it's very hard for them to recover. I know that when I played against Great Steel in round 9, I just played a Sisu and wiped 5 characters from the board, including a beast that I had shrunk down with an ice block. So after that happened, the game was over.
Yeah. No, that's huge, man. I'm trying to look at all the new cards. So do you have a thought, since you have Cusco and Hideaway, I know you and I have talked about this before, but here we'll say it for the video. Is there one you kind of prefer over the other? How do you feel? Because they both have a similar role. How do you feel about these two?
I definitely prefer Hideaway over Cusco. The fact that Hideaway is just 2 ink compared to the 6 that Cusco is. There are a lot of times where even when you're playing against red purple, if you tap out on 6 for this just to get rid of their castle, and that's all you're doing for your turn, and then they crack back with a Bendusa in order to clear it, it kind of feels a net negative in that scenario. Whereas you could just hide away the location and then either play a Grandma Tala or Hiram, and even if they Medusa in those scenarios, you still at least replaced the cards, so it's not like you went down on any kind of advantage or anything.
Yeah, that's fair. Thoughts on, so Be Prepared has obviously always been a card that's very prevalent in any red deck since set 1. You were only running 2. Sisu kind of helps fill that role. How many Be Preps do you think is right now? Do you think 2 is a good number, or why only 2 instead of 4 or 3?
We're probably getting to the point that you'll need at least 3 or 4 B prep in the deck, even with Pete in the format. I think Green Steel just threatening Diablos and Prince Johns makes it to where you want to be able to get that board wipe on 7 off the top of your deck, even if they're discarding cards, in order to stabilize the game. I know I only personally played 2 because I was worried about the green decks, like green purple in particular, which is also why I played the Chromacon. Yeah. But I just didn't want songs to really get ripped from my hand during the tournament.
Fair.
So only having 6 was pretty good. However, I do think B prep should probably be more than a 2 of at this point.
You heard it here first, folks. So obviously this game, like you said, I do think pound for pound, it's probably the most powerful deck in the format. Why wouldn't you want to take the most powerful deck to a set championship?
So you wouldn't want to take this deck because it's also the most targeted deck, which means that you could have people playing more aggro-based strategies in order to pretty much choke out red-blue from the tournament. If that's the case, then stuff like the Sisu Daring Visitor could probably get a lot better, which I personally didn't like for this event. But if you're worried about aggro, then I wouldn't take red-blue. I'd probably take some sort of steel-based strategy in order to help mitigate that.
Gotcha. Well said. Well, sir, we'll shy away from your favorite deck here for a moment, and then we will jump on to the Steel Song deck, which got a great brand new legend that has really shown its worth in the new Naveen. Yeah, similar to to Emerald Steel, man, if this deck has its nuts opening, there are some, it often feels like, oh, okay, there's literally nothing I can do. Like, no matter what card I play, it's just going to die. And when you see that, wait, they're only on 5 ink, how did they play like 7 cards that turn? It's because singing is just that darn strong. Justin, why would you want to bring Steel Song to a set championship?
This deck completely preys on any kind of early game aggro based strategy. I know it can have a favorable matchup into green purple. Yeah, green purple. Just because the fact that Let the Storm Rage On and also Strike the Raging Fire deal with green purple's early aggression really well, and can get rid of the early Clarabelles to prevent the shift line. Also be able to just dump out your hand and then refuel with a Whole New World has always been a very powerful thing. Probably one of the most powerful things you can do in the game of Lorcana. It's a solid deck for sure, but it does take some skill in order to pilot correctly, as well as knowing how to mulligan correctly. But if also Rapunzel and Naveen are just powerhouse cards, because even if you do not see the Whole New World, Rapunzel can keep the advantage. And if you don't see Ariel, at least you can do Naveen on 4 in order to sing a Whole New World in order to reset your hand.
Yeah, Naveen, man, it's like, I don't remember if it was DeCandio or someone described it. I think it might have been DeCandio, where he's like, imagine turn 4, you want to tap out, you want to play 4 ink and use Along Came Zeus. Now imagine it comes with a 3/3 body that also quests for 2.
Yeah, exactly. So Naveen's a very good card, and it probably will only get better over time as long as they keep printing new good songs.
Well, and so like the Emerald Steel matchup, this deck also gets to take advantage of Pete. So essentially says, hey, I get to do all my singing, but you're actually going to do none on your turn.
Yeah, I mean, Pete is just like a totally fair card. Not really, but it's just like a feels bad card for the opponent.
Yeah.
Just being able to like shut off at least a third of most decks, third if not half of decks. So just being able to protect your board in this deck was really important. However, doesn't protect you against the board wipes in the form of Scar or Sisu Empowered Sibling. So even though it may stop Be Prepared, a lot of the red decks have pivoted in order to play other mass removal.
It's interesting to me that this deck has also kind of pivoted to some early lore pressure. Like in the past, it didn't really tend to run like Piglet, but now it's got Piglet, Smee. It's not running the flutes, it's running something like Lantern. And that was always the one quote unquote saving grace against it in the past, is that it tended not to get lore super fast, but it can clearly pivot and shift now with cards like this. It's like, actually, oh, you're setting up? Yeah, I'm just going to quest out in front of you. Do you like the kind of shift to the Lantern over a card like Flute?
I think Lantern plays better into the steel-based mirrors, to where you can dump out your hand and then wheel and get more advantage out of it. It also allows you to keep up against red-blue at times, but Flute is better into the more control-based matchups like red-purple and red-blue. So it's just all preference. I do understand not playing Flute though, just because it's a do nothing card by itself, whereas Lantern can help facilitate you playing extra cards in a turn.
Sure. No, that makes sense. Well, we know how strong this deck can be. What is a reason you wouldn't want to take it to a set championship?
It has a very, very, very difficult matchup into red-blue, or almost any blue deck. I think it can actually be somewhat favored into blue steel, but if blue steel just has their nut draw, like I don't think even amber steel could win. But red blue just eats this deck alive.
Yeah.
Also, I think the deck is not fairly consistent. It feels like it's consistent, but it also feels like it isn't.
Yeah, there's times I've seen it almost defeat itself because I don't know if they're just hitting their uninkables or they're just not seeing the cards in the order they want to see or what it is.
Yeah, there's a lot of times where Amber Steel can beat itself more than it being beat by the opponent. So, for instance, if you see Aerial but don't see Whole New World, then you can run out of gas pretty quickly. And then also, if you see Whole New World but none of your singers, then you're casting Whole New World for its full retail, which is not what you want to be doing in this deck whatsoever.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all about cheating ink. No,
yeah.
Well said. Was there anything else you want to add about this one?
I personally don't like the deck, although I've never been a fan of it, even back in the set 1 days. So
yeah, agreed. Not a fan of singing in general for me. Well, let's move on to our last one. This is Emerald Amethyst. Now, this one, let me think. Probably compared to all these other ones we've gone over, I think this one looks the most different than it has in the past. And obviously a lot of different versions of this I've seen run, but in the past it was very heavily an aggro deck that could kind of switch up if it needed to a bit, but these versions that we tended to see in Birmingham over the weekend as well as in Vegas, they still have some aggro, of course, with the Merfolk and the Pegasus, but we've really seen this like mid-range power of it come out with the Clarabelles. Tiberius Rourke, I think, has really shown his power as well. What do you think of Amethyst Emerald here in set 5?
I think this is a solid deck. It has good early game and it also has good mid game. And then Ursula and Clarabelle can help close out games as well. Yeah, then Clarabelle can also help you keep up against a lot of decks too. And then a 5/6 body is something that is not to be scoffed at for sure. Yeah. The only card that can cleanly answer it is Maui, and that comes down after you've already drawn your cards off of the Clarabelle.
Yeah.
So, I think the early aggression that Bonsai provides too is a lot better than what Flynn Rider provided.
Yeah.
Just because it comes attached to a 3/2 body instead of a 1/2. Even though Flynn Rider got a card out of their hand when it was challenged, even if the Bonsai is trading into something, you're still getting that 1-for-1 trade, but they're not leaving a character behind on the board. So having the 3/2 body is actually very relevant a lot of times. It's pretty much this deck's version of Smee whenever you think about it.
Yeah, it's a nice comparison. Now, he's been a great addition. This Clarabelle, this one drop has been surprisingly good, too, into, like, red-blue matchups where sometimes you see it come down late. Like, all right, I'm just going to break that dime if you don't mind.
Yeah, so that card is... I like how it's multifunctional. It can be a one-drop card or it can be a 3-drop with a solid effect. Then it's also a pretty good shift target for Clarabelle. So, pretty much gets a thumbs up from me for the deck.
Obviously using the new Elsa as well.
Yes.
I remember you were really high on this You're Welcome card when the spoilers were released. Do you still really like this one? How do you feel about it?
Yeah, I still really like it. At least back in set 3, Into the Inklands. Yeah, Into the Inklands. The green-purple deck struggled a lot whenever big characters came down on the board, as well as locations too. Some locations were just backbreaking, just because all your characters were small, and the really only way you could pump up anything was with the Fox Crab combo.
Yeah.
But being able to have a clean answer to stuff like Tamatoa, even though they get 2 cards back in return, it's pretty good. This deck is all about tempo, so as long as you're controlling the board and progressing your way further towards the win, then you don't really care about giving them those 2 extra cards.
Yeah. Do you like the shift with the Lyle Tiberius Rourke? He was putting up good results on the streams, man. He looked very strong in a lot of those matchups.
Yeah, so I think Lyle's power doesn't lie in the ability to give something reckless, but more so the fact that makes your opponent lose a lore for every time another character of yours is banished.
Yeah.
Just because I can completely mess up with math and stuff. I know when I played against green purple at Vegas, this was more of a card I would target with Brawl first before anything else, just to prevent from losing lore, just because red blue, it's especially in the early to mid game, it's difficult for red blue to accumulate lore. So whenever you're getting rid of that lore, it can mess up with their Tamatoa math in a couple turns down the line. So I think Lyle is a very good card. Also, being able to give Reckless to stuff like Tamatoa and Hiram is really good.
Yeah.
Even Diablo too, because you can force a Diablo to trade into something like Bonsai.
Yeah. No, that's huge. So you said this deck was very solid. Why would you not want to take this to a set championship?
If I think it doesn't play a whole lot well into steel-based decks. So like if there's a whole lot of amber steel, and even green steel now can be a little difficult, I would be pretty wary of taking it. I generally try looking at a metagame and thinking of what the best deck is to take for that specific event. And right now there's a lot of hype around the green steel deck, and then as well there's still people playing amber steel as well as blue steel. So it's something that I would take if there was a lot of red blue, but if in red purple, this deck completely just feeds on red purple. But if there's a whole bunch of steel in the room, then I would kind of be uneasy having this sleeved up in my deck box.
Yeah, it does have some very extremes, it feels like, with certain matchups where it'll just dominate one set of ink colors and then just get obliterated by others.
Yeah, I mean, this deck can play decently well in the steel, I guess, if you're able to do like the Ursula shift line early on or consistently. But if they are just constantly removing your board, it's pretty difficult to regain that lost footing.
Yeah, no, that's a fair point. One thing I've always liked about this deck too is it actually tends to have less uninkables than a lot of these other decks. We always know, blue-red's known for having a pretty high amount, but as is some of the sing-songy decks. But yeah, this one has always been able to keep it relatively low.
Yeah, that's one good thing about it. Even red-purple was always able to keep low uninkables. And I think the uninkables you play in the deck are just, Fox and the early lore pressure characters.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, obviously Lyle, but Lyle's a card you want to be putting on the board every time instead of inking anyway.
Exactly, yeah. No, that's a great point. Well, sir, those are the main 5 we wanted to cover. Were there anything else you wanted to mention? Anything else you wanted to say?
I mean, I know some people are going to be like, where's the blue steel at? But I think it's in a really weird position in the format.
So, yeah, well, so blue steel has been so popular in the past. Let's take a moment real quick. What makes it in a weird place?
So as you can see here with Jonathan Lamb's deck, he pivoted his blue steel deck to focus more on aerial, which helps him play better into red blue since it doesn't get hit by Sisu. And a lot of red blue decks were cutting Be Prepared down to either anywhere from 0 to 2 copies only in the deck. So being able to have something that can't be answered unless it's specifically Be Prepared is really good for that matchup. However, it being uninkable, it's a very uneasy thing for me. It means you have to build your deck around it, and you have to choose your uninkable choices pretty wisely. But yeah, it's red blue matchup. It's pretty uneasy. Sisu can completely wreck your day. Their Tamatoas are generally more, well, they're about the same, but I feel like when I'm playing red blue, my Tamatoas are more powerful despite blue steel having 4 extra cantrips.
Yeah.
For the items.
Well, and they need to run something like Let It Go to get rid of Tamatoa, whereas you have Be Prepared and Dragonfire. Like, you don't want to have to burn, like 2 Along Came Zeus on a Tamatoa.
Yeah. Another thing, too, is that Visions of the Future completely elevated red blue to a whole nother level, which I don't think blue steel can utilize a Vision of the Future as effectively, just because the cards you need to play in the blue steel deck are more of a priority before playing Visions, whereas red blue was able to just pretty much slot it in the place of Develop Your Brain.
Yeah. No, that's huge. Well, and I highlighted Cogsworth a little earlier. Like, this card is so good into the steel matchups where you can just lock out decks like the Steel Song or the Green Steel. But, man, the Sisu just, like, gobbles it up. It's like, yep, no worries. I'll just go ahead and remove it without targeting it.
Yeah, like, having that removed as well as your Hiram removed at the same time can be backbreaking. You could play stuff like Chenpo to also stop, like, Maui and all that, but I don't know if I really want to be playing a 4/7 bodyguard in my deck right now.
Yeah. That's a fair point. No, good thoughts, sir. Well, that's kind of what we have for your set championships coming up in Shimmering Skies. I hope you'll take Justin's advice to heart. He's always very thoughtful about his decks and how he looks at them, and hopefully you've heard the strengths and weaknesses here. Was there a deck that we forgot to mention? Please let me know in the comments below. It means so much. Justin, anyone you want to give a shout out to before we go?
Yeah, just give a shout out to all of everyone in the St. Louis area. I want to say thank you to them for always rooting me on and believing me. So getting that invite and having everyone in the area being happy was pretty great. So
we had a fun time watching, man. I wish we got to see you on stream, but here's hoping you'll get to be on there at Nationals or maybe Seattle or something.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. Well, folks, let me know what you think in the comments below. Is there a deck we forgot to mention? Is there some secret spicy tech? Maybe you shouldn't reveal that to everybody, but, who's going to go into your locals anyway, right? And let me know how you do. If you win any of your set championships, you get yourself a Mirabelle or a playmat. Justin, thank you again for joining me. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me, Travis. I really appreciate you for reaching out to me.
Anytime, sir. Folks, good luck in your set championships. And until next time. Take care.
Goodbye.